You feel it before you understand it. A quiet pressure behind your eyes, a sense that something in you has been waiting for this exact moment. You weren't supposed to hear these words. They were never meant for people who still believe the world is fair or that goodness alone protects you. They were meant for the ones who noticed early that kindness gets exploited, honesty gets punished, and hesitation gets eaten alive. You've carried this longer than you admit. Every time you trusted the wrong person, every time you played fair and still lost, every time you wondered why people with less talent, less depth, less heart somehow rose above you. This is not coincidence. This is structure. And tonight, that structure cracks. Because there is a set of rules older than morality, colder than comfort, and more honest than hope. Rules that don't care how good you are, only how aware you are. Rules that shape kings, destroy naive men, and turn invisible pressure into leverage. You were told to be yourself, to be open, to be nice, to explain your intentions, to trust the process, and you paid for it. This is the moment your life begins to make sense, not because the world softens, but because you harden intelligently. You are not broken. You were never taught another way. The name most people whisper with fear, guilt, or misunderstanding is Machiavelli. They say his ideas are evil. They say power corrupts. They say manipulation is wrong. But here is the forbidden truth they don't tell you. Power does not corrupt. Power reveals. And the man without power is not moral. He is vulnerable. Tonight, you stop being vulnerable. You don't become cruel. You become precise. You don't dominate others. You stop letting them dominate you. And once you see how this works, you will never unsee it. Because every predator follows rules, and every prey dies by ignoring them. Look back carefully, not emotionally, strategically. Notice the moments where things shifted against you. The promotion that went to someone louder, not smarter. The relationship where honesty made you predictable. The friendship where loyalty turned into leverage against you. You felt something was off, but you couldn't name it. You blamed timing, you blamed luck, you blamed yourself. But the truth is simpler and more dangerous. You were playing by rules that only work among equals, while others were playing to win. Here is the first thing Machiavelli understood that changes everything. People do not respond to who you are. They respond to how you make them feel in relation to themselves. Smaller or larger, safer or threatened, superior or exposed. Every interaction is a silent negotiation of status. And you've been negotiating blind. You thought being understood mattered. You thought clarity built trust. You thought showing your hand made you honest. But honesty without power is confession. And confession is blood in the water. You're not imagining this. Think of how quickly respect disappears once people know too much about you. How fast warmth turns into entitlement. How often kindness invites testing. This is not because people are evil. It's because human nature responds to strength before it responds to virtue. Machiavelli didn't invent this. He observed it. And what he saw terrified people. Because it stripped away comforting lies. Here is the thread that will follow you through everything that comes next. The world is not moved by truth. It is moved by perception, and perception is a weapon. You don't need to lie. You need to control what is visible. You don't need to threaten. You need to be unpredictable. You don't need to dominate. You need to be impossible to read. This is where transformation begins. Not externally, but internally. A quiet shift. You stop reacting. You start watching. You stop explaining. You start positioning. You stop hoping people will be fair. You start making outcomes inevitable. And yes, part of you resists this because you were trained to believe power makes you bad. But ask yourself honestly, has being good kept you safe? Has being open protected you? Has being patient rewarded you? Or did it just make you available? It's okay to feel this because what you're feeling is not corruption. It's awakening. The first psychological shift is subtle and irreversible. You stop asking, what should I say? And start asking, what does this situation require me to withhold? Silence becomes heavier than words. Stillness becomes more intimidating than anger. Machiavelli understood something few people dare to practice. Whoever controls the frame controls the outcome. The frame is the invisible border around every interaction. It decides who is explaining and who is judging, who is reacting and who is deciding. And here is the brutal rule. The moment you defend yourself, you accept a lower position. Because now you are answering a charge. Now you are inside their narrative. Strong people do not rush to be understood. They allow others to doubt. Doubt creates distance. Distance creates caution. Caution creates power. You've survived things you still don't have words for. Moments where speaking up made things worse. Moments where explaining yourself only fed the fire. Moments where silence, by accident, gave you relief. That wasn't weakness. That was instinct trying to teach you. Machiavellian strength is not loud. It is composed. You don't announce boundaries. You enforce them through absence. You don't correct disrespect. You make it expensive. You don't chase loyalty. You test it. And this is where the predator-prey dynamic flips. Because predators hunt certainty. They hunt patterns. They hunt emotional reactions. When you become unreadable, you become unsafe to attack. Not feared, assessed. And assessment slows aggression. This is the moment you stop being easy. You begin to realize that being liked is optional. Being respected is not. And respect is not requested. It is inferred. From what you tolerate, from what you ignore, from what you never explain. This is not about becoming cold. It's about becoming intentional. You're allowed to want more. Not more attention, more control. Not over people, over yourself. Because once you control yourself, others lose access to your reactions. And reactions are the currency they've been stealing from you. Now comes the danger, because once you see this, you notice the hidden threat everywhere. You notice who benefits from your confusion, who relaxes when you over-explain, who grows bold when you seek approval. You start seeing patterns instead of faces. And one pattern stands above all others. Every predator disguises itself as something reasonable. They call it honesty. They call it concern. They call it humor. They call it love. But it always carries the same signature. They want access to your emotions without accountability. They provoke. They test. They withdraw warmth. They apply pressure, just enough to make you move. And for most of your life, you moved. You apologized when you weren't wrong. You clarified when you weren't confused. You softened when you should have stayed still. Not anymore. Because here is the Machiavellian line you cross in this moment. You stop rewarding bad behavior with explanation. You let silence do the work. And silence is not empty. It is a mirror. People reveal themselves when they don't get the reaction they expected. They talk more, they justify, they escalate, they expose, and you watch. This is where power becomes quiet, where you realize you don't need to win arguments, only positioning. You don't need to prove innocence, only composure. You don't need to fight every threat, only outlast it. But be warned, once you step into this awareness, you can't go back to innocence. Because now you know, every predator has a predator. And the most dangerous one is the person who learned the rules and chose restraint. You've been standing at the edge of this truth longer than you realize. There is a reason your instincts kept whispering, something isn't right. There is a reason certain rooms drained you, certain people unsettled you, certain victories felt hollow even when you won. Here is the core revelation Machiavelli built everything on. People are not moved by logic. They are moved by fear, desire, and uncertainty. And the greatest mistake you were trained to make was believing that good intentions protect you. They don't. Good intentions advertise vulnerability. This is the part few people are willing to accept, but you already feel it in your body. When you are predictable, you are controllable. When you are emotionally transparent, you are exploitable. When you explain yourself, you hand others the weapon they were waiting for. You've carried this longer than you admit. The frustration of watching quieter, sharper people rise while louder, kinder ones stall. The confusion of being respected only after you withdraw. The strange relief you feel when you stop caring what people think, even briefly. That relief is not apathy. It is power returning to its rightful place. Machiavelli didn't teach cruelty. He taught self-preservation in a world that punishes naivete. And here's where you must pause. just for a breath. Ask yourself honestly, without judging the answer, where in your life have you been overavailable? Where have you mistaken openness for strength? Where have you explained when silence would have protected you? You don't need to answer out loud. Just notice what surfaces. That awareness, that tightening in your chest, that's the first sign you're no longer asleep. And if you're willing, even quietly, to reflect on that moment, you already know this wasn't random. You're not broken. You were never taught another way. Some people will feel threatened by what you're becoming. Others will feel drawn to it. That split is not your problem. Power doesn't explain itself. It moves subtly, through micro moments most people overlook, a pause before responding, a message left unanswered, a gaze held half a second longer than expected. These moments seem small, but they rewire how others experience you. Think about the last time someone tested you. Not directly, indirectly. A joke that cut a little too close. A concern that felt like a judgment. A question that wasn't really a question. Your body noticed before your mind did. That tightening, that urge to clarify, that impulse to smooth things over. That impulse is what Machiavelli would have you master, because the person who controls their impulses controls the tempo of every interaction. And tempo is power. When you respond too fast, you reveal priority. When you respond emotionally, you reveal leverage. When you respond at all, you reveal access. But when you don't, people begin to feel something unfamiliar. Uncertainty. They replay the moment. They wonder if they misstepped. They question their position. You didn't attack. You didn't accuse. You didn't defend. You simply didn't feed the exchange. And that absence is louder than confrontation. You survive things you still don't have words for, including the slow erosion of respect that comes from always being available. This is why Machiavellian strength feels calm, not aggressive. It's not about winning every moment. It's about deciding which moments deserve you. Every time you don't react, you force the other person to sit with themselves. And most people can't. They feel silence with insecurity. They feel distance with mistakes. They feel uncertainty with exposure. You don't need to corner anyone. Just stop cushioning their behavior. It's okay to feel this shift. You're allowed to want more, not more validation, but more control over your own energy. You walk into the room, you feel it before anyone speaks. The subtle recalibration. The way conversations soften slightly, the way eyes flick toward you, then away. Nothing dramatic has changed, except you. Your posture is quieter. Your presence is heavier. You no longer rush to fill space. Someone makes a comment. It lands somewhere between a joke and a test. You notice it. You feel the familiar impulse rise, then fade. You consider your response and choose stillness. The room shifts, not outwardly, internally. The person who spoke feels it first. They laugh a little too much. They add context you didn't ask for. You say nothing. You're not punishing. You're observing. Another voice jumps in, changing the subject. Someone else watches you more carefully now. You feel something click. This is what presence does when it's no longer seeking approval. Later, someone approaches you privately. Their tone is different, more measured, less casual. They are unsure where they stand, and that uncertainty is not cruelty, it's respect recalibrating. You realize something important in this moment. You don't need to assert dominance. You just need to stop surrendering it. When you speak slowly. When you listen fully. When you disengage, you do it cleanly. No explanations, no emotional residue. You leave the interaction lighter. Not because you won, but because you didn't give anything away. This is how power integrates into the body, quietly, naturally, without announcement. But here is where the deeper tension begins, because awareness changes relationships. Some people will sense your shift and adapt. They'll respect the boundary you never named. Others will feel threatened. They will test harder, push subtly, escalate emotionally. This is where most people collapse back into old patterns. They mistake escalation for intimacy. They mistake pressure for importance. You won't, because now you see the pattern. Predators don't attack strength. They probe uncertainty, and you're no longer uncertain. You don't argue with disrespect. You let it echo. You don't chase clarity. You let confusion do the work. You don't rush to be understood. You let people wonder. And here's the unresolved truth that lingers, quietly dangerous. The more you withdraw emotionally, the more others project onto you. Some will see authority. Some will see threat. Some will see mystery. None of that is your responsibility. Your responsibility is restraint, because restraint is what separates reaction from intention. And intention is what turns awareness into power. Something is forming now, a presence that doesn't need to prove itself. But this is not the end, because there is a cost to this path. Silence attracts attention. Distance creates gravity. Control invites challenge. And soon you will face a moment where restraint alone is no longer enough. Where timing matters more than silence. Where the next move decides everything. The rhythm changes here. You can feel it. The quiet confidence you've built starts to attract friction. Not loud resistance, calculated resistance. This is where most people fail. They think silence alone is enough. They think withdrawal solves everything. But Machiavelli knew better. Silence is powerful until it isn't. Because eventually someone will test whether your stillness is strength or fear disguised as restraint. You notice it in small ways, a challenge wrapped in politeness, a public question meant to corner you, a decision made around you, not with you. The air tightens. This is the moment where timing matters more than morality. If you retreat now, your silence becomes submission. If you overreact, your composure shatters. So you do something far more dangerous. You act once, cleanly, decisively, not with emotion, with precision. Machiavellian power is not constant pressure. It's strategic interruption. You let things build. You let people relax. You let them assume. And then at the exact moment they think you won't move, you do. One boundary enforced, one line drawn, one consequence delivered without explanation, and then you return to silence. This single action rewrites everything, because now your restraint has teeth. People don't fear loud aggression. They adapt to it. They fear controlled unpredictability. They fear the person who waits. This is where your presence becomes a reference point. Others begin adjusting before you speak. They soften language. They hesitate mid-sentence. Not because you demanded respect, but because you taught them what happens without it. You don't correct narratives anymore. You let outcomes speak. You don't announce standards. You enforce them once and let memory do the rest. And quietly, something shifts in how you move through the world. You choose fewer words, fewer battles, fewer explanations. Your energy becomes selective. And here's the invisible truth most people miss. When you stop chasing understanding, people start chasing your approval. Not openly, subconsciously. They seek your reaction. They notice your absence. They weigh your silence. This is not manipulation for its own sake. This is alignment. You are no longer bending to chaos. Chaos bends around you. And if you're still listening, still here, still feeling this tighten inside your chest, then you already know this isn't entertainment. It's recognition. You're not imagining this. Something in you has been waiting to hear permission to stop being endlessly accessible, to stop over-explaining your worth, to stop negotiating your position in rooms you already earned entry into. This is that permission. Power isn't loud. It's the moment people lower their voice when you enter, without knowing why.